Hey there. Welcome to the Breakthrough Creative. I'm your host, John McDavitt, and this is the place where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. Now, last year, I had as my guest Carlos Huante, and he shared about his early beginnings in his career, how he started in animation, and we had planned to get into learning more about his work in the practical effects industry and then working at ILM and as the advent of digital CGI came into play in the effects world, and then being an independent. And we never got there. We talked so long about some of the early stuff that I asked him if he would come back, and he said yes graciously. And so we came to an agreement that a cool episode would be him sharing about his work on Men in Black under the direction of Rick Baker and, of course, the direction of the directors and producers on that show and how he managed that. And then his work on Prometheus with Ridley Scott, and then his work on Pennywise in the newest version of the character in the movie It with director, and I want to get his name right, Andy Muschietti. And he goes into great depth about each one of those projects. And you don't want to miss the last 10 minutes or so of the episode because he starts to share some of his thoughts on art and I should say art design, and then the standards and what the public wants and where the public is at and where artists can go as they continue to explore their career because you're still trying to satisfy the needs of your client, whoever that is. So that's really good stuff. It's all really good. I have a soft place in my heart for Carlos, so I'm really glad that he's back. If you'd take a moment, would you go ahead, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, would you give us a follow and would you leave a 5-star rating and a review? If you could write a nice review, that would be really cool and encouraging and helpful. And then if you're watching on YouTube, would you mind subscribing and then hitting that little bell, and you'll be notified whenever a new episode comes out. And if whatever platform you're listening, watching on, would you share it with the artists in your life, or share it on social media if there's an episode you really like? And that's just really appreciated if you would do that to help the show grow and awareness about the show. So, with that, let's get into my interview with Carlos Huante, a premier creature designer. All right. Well, I have my friend Carlos Huante here with me today, and we are going to talk about a few projects he's worked on and the process of those projects. And I'm grateful to have you here, Carlos.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. John.
You rock. We just had a great long conversation before we're even having this conversation.
The unfortunate thing is that we can go on and talk about anything. So I'm going to try to avoid tangents as much as possible.
So before we get into the three projects we were talking about, maybe just briefly, if you're cool with it, do you want to share any thoughts on Dune?
Dune. Yeah. I mean, sure. First, I loved it. You know, the contrast. Had I had really educated myself while I was working on that film with the story in the most contemporary way to do that, which was listen to the stories on YouTube while I was drawing. I know, don't get mad at me. I didn't read the books. So I was really, I was into the story. I just didn't realize how much that story had affected all science fiction film. as it did. I mean, that and the Princess of Mars, the John Carter series, really affected science fiction dramatically. So many things were stolen from those stories that I didn't realize, uh, you know, prior to knowing those stories in depth, right? Um, how much they influenced all science fiction, really, you know. So, but anyway, the movie Dune. I was very excited when I saw the movie because he really addressed the story. He really hit it as much. I mean, as much as you can in a film, because honestly, it's such a crazy story to try to realize. It does seem impossible, like people were saying. Even with the David Lynch film, trying to put it all into the first book into the film, it didn't work that well, you know, with the David Lynch movie. But I still liked that movie a lot
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I loved the art direction, and I liked it. I liked all the characters. I didn't mind, you know, them, you know, us hearing the characters think and all that sort of stuff. I like the way that he handled sound and the weirding technique of battle, and that it involves sound the way that he kind of interpreted that. Um, uh, it was more fantastic in a way than, say, this one. The new one is more naturalized, which is what I would expect from Denny. He would naturalize everything a little bit more. Um, but the idea of that lace of fantasy being kind of on top of that naturalized take uh, was enough to put it in science fiction fantasy, right? Uh, it's kind of like the lightsaber and a little bit of the force,
Yeah.
not overdone, just
Yeah.
enough to escape reality that we know here is it's a fantasy. And I love that he was restrained that way because it makes it completely different than the first attempt at the story. You
Yeah.
know, but good. I loved it. I thought it was beautifully kept, perfectly cast, which I was really concerned. The art direction was awesome. I loved it. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, it was really well done. I concur with all that. And you specifically had a hand in designing what for the film?
the worms. The worms. I was
Yeah.
hoping to do. I actually did more than that. I did a design for the navigator that I can't talk about because
Yeah.
obviously it's going to be in the next film. But it was a thing that Denny was had to actually tell me, and he didn't want to tell me that the character wasn't going to be in the film, and he knew I was going to get upset. He goes, "I know, Carlos, you're going to get angry at me, but I need to focus. There's so much to focus on. I don't think I'm going to have the bandwidth to be able to fit that in also and interweave that story and try to keep it within the time, you know."
Yeah.
And I was thinking, you can't make the movie without the navigator now. You can't.
I
And
noticed
so,
he wasn't in there. I was looking for a navigator. I didn't see a navigator.
yeah. So I told him, he goes, okay, okay, okay. He goes, design me one and maybe it'll convince me. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna convince you. So I went through a whole, week of just drawing stuff. And then I gave him, I finally came to it, and I knew I came to it with one of the later last images I did for that week. It's kind of when you feel that, when you come to a design, you just feel like, this is it. If they don't like this, then it's their problem because this is the character right here. And you can feel it. You really do know it. Um, it happens every time. I've had that feeling every time. When I hit it, I know that that's it. And more than likely, most of the time, I should say, uh, they uh, they choose that character. Right? That's the one that always makes it through. When you can feel it. It feels right. Um,
That's awesome.
I love it when they feel it. Well, Denny felt that when I gave him the last image. He looked at it, he goes, Carlos, you found our navigator. That's it. And like, so I told him, I go, hey, so it's going to make it in the film, right? And he goes, oh, I can't promise you that still.
Oh
So,
my. Oh, well, very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah, it's a good
So
story.
So Carlos and I were talking, and we wanted to walk through three different projects that he's worked on with three different directors, and one is more of the creature person, who was the character designer, um, character creator maker for the film, Rick Baker, and just take a look at his process with each person he worked with, and the development. So really, this episode is about how to how to bring a concept to life for your client and to satisfy the needs of the project. It's probably fair, right?
Yeah, I would
Uh,
say
yeah,
that for sure. Yeah, it's about, because I mean, within that, say, your category would definitely be how to, what the process is, or how to navigate with clients that are that are not the same. They all
yeah,
have different. They all have they all have different starting points,
yeah,
you know, and some know what they want, some don't. Some are your buffer, like this is what we're going to have here. I have Rick as a buffer between me and the client. So he is not the client as much as he's my interpreter, right? And he was fantastic at that, by the way. Great buffer. He really kept me safe from the chaos. I love him for that on that project. And sometimes I wish I had that on many projects, you know, because
yeah.
but you need someone that knows how to communicate, right? So to have
Right.
that. So,
And so that project we're talking about was the original Men in Black,
right.
and we picked Mikey as the character. So Mikey was this character at the beginning of the film where they're out in the desert, and he's hidden as one of the migrant workers, and it turns out he's this great big, almost kind of a slug paddly guy, and I'll let you take it from there, the process to get to that.
So in the script, it was just written as giant space Mexican, right? Because they were on the Mexican border.
Yeah.
I thought, I mean, honestly, that was very funny to me. I go, okay, we finally made it into a picture as a star. Okay, this is good. We're going to be the science fiction lead, you know, the lead in the science fiction film. Um, so that's all that was written for the character. And I was working in, say, TV animation at the time. I think I was working on G.I. Joe Extreme at the time, and I had already met Rick Baker, but he hired me and a bunch of guys, all freelance, to come in and work on this project. And my work was received really well, right? So he wanted me to come and work for him um, uh, full time, and so I did, of course, right? Because I mean, I had met Rick before, but I mean, this is kind of a hero of mine. He's asking me to come and work for him. He was very complimentary about my work and how I approached and attacked the work. Um, and so I was, I said, I'm not going to say no to this. This is when I went into film full time. And, you know, Rick is awesome, so um, he was really, in that meeting, he took me aside and he pulled me into his room after everyone was let go. The meeting was over. He brought me into the room and he was telling me how I'm going to come and work for him, right? At that point. And he was showing me all this cool stuff I had, been around, right? And he was showing me all the stuff, um, in the shop. The head for American Werewolf in London was there. And I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm like, okay. And it's Rick Baker, showing, hey, you want to see this? And he's all excited about these little gizmos in there. And I'm like, this guy's cool. Okay, yeah, I want to come and work and be around all this. Or making stuff. Matt Rose is there in the shop. All these guys I looked that are my age, but that I followed because I watched Matt and Steve Wang uh, come up, and we were all coming up, but came in separate ways. I came in as an illustrator designer through animation as a character designer, right? So I was already practicing being a character, creature designer, but from a different side. And I was coming in, and those guys were, they came in doing what they do, which was makeup effects, right? And so I was excited to meet these guys. So the whole thing was very exciting. That aside, now working for Rick, now he brought me into the shop, and I'm working full time. And the director really didn't know, as that description tells you, giant space Mexican, and Edgar was just a giant alien at the end. He wasn't anything. You understand? I actually tried working on this film at Amblin, through Amblin, prior to there being a director, prior to Rick, right? And this was years before. And it was such a mess of, there was no vision for the project, and they were trying to find the vision. It was a mess. And I literally drew exactly the way I was going to draw for Rick, but the work wasn't accepted there. But when I went to work for Rick, it all was.
What do you think the difference was?
I think that there was a director finally, and the vision was already getting set. And my approach to the aliens, it would work depending on how you realized them, right? So the designs weren't the problem, right? And I was drawing for them to be realized in 3D. It's just the way that I drew, right? So I don't think they're, you're dealing with producers there, and they don't understand that aspect of drawing or art in general, right? They look at a pretty picture. That's all they want to see. I will make something pretty and ugly at the same time, and weird. That's what I love, where I like to live, right? In my artwork. So all that stuff was identical to the stuff that I was doing for Rick. But now we had characters written out, who they were. They were all, we had Mikey, we had Edgar, we had Chucky, the guy inside of the head. We had aliens for the film now. And so I think that they had been working already with Rick for, I don't know, maybe a couple months, and they were having trouble coming up with the designs. I came in and with a bunch of guys and started drawing, and then all of a sudden my drawings, are the ones that they start liking. So, and so I was able to be. Rick just made me that guy, and I had a room there at the shop, there in the old shop, the one in Roberta, in Burbank area, and I started just drawing. And Mikey, I had already come up with the idea in that freelance hit with the eye stalks and all the paddles, and I was thinking of a frog actually, right? So that's why he has like the frog kind of disc tips, and all that sort of thing. I decided to make Edgar a bug in that weekend. So it was a weekend of just me drawing around the clock, and I came up with just a bunch of roughs. That's all they were, really rough, right? And threw it
So
down.
was that the expectation, by the way, at that point? It's like, okay, you come on, and it sounds like you guys were pressed because they're already 2 months into development.
Probably
And
something like that, yeah.
just work over the weekend, give me your best. And I know you, and I know you've permanently got a pencil tethered to your claw. So you're going to town, and you're excited, right? Because you're working with some of your idols.
Yeah, for two reasons. Great project. It's for Amblin, for Spielberg. I need a makeup for whatever I went through the last time, right? Because I felt like I couldn't satisfy them, right? So there's a number of things going on here that were in my head. I needed to really hit them with an anvil. I don't like it when I have someone that doesn't get what I do. And I feel like I let them down, right? So I have to put in the effort beyond the pay, right? To make it something that they like, right? And still put myself in there. I mean, if I have to turn myself off to make them happy, um, at least they're happy and I'm fine. I don't like what I did, but they're happy. But at least I try to give them the best version of what they asked for,
Yeah.
right? And make it make a design that has some integrity, regardless of their request, right? Um, because they don't know enough to know what that is when they ask for really bad stuff, right? So they don't know enough to know the difference between something that has volume integrity, meaning that all the forms are working together and it has a good design, everything flows, and say, oh, a 2D piece of art that's flat, that won't ever be able to, you can never translate that, right?
Right.
So, you know, so I try to bring both. And sometimes it's a matter of trying to educate the client that this thing has to get made. So you're now looking at something in 3D. And you have to get them through the process of accepting that. It's no longer a flat 2D image that they may have fallen in love with. How do you translate that? And so the minute you put it in 3D, they don't understand that. They don't know what they're looking at anymore. So that's part of
Now,
the
just to
difficulty.
clarify, when you're talking about 3D, you're talking about drawing something that looks dimensionally real,
Right.
right?
The volumes go back in space.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's no
Yeah.
longer you know, like a graphic cutout, right?
Right.
So with this project, after that weekend I brought it in, we now had Edgar's a bug, okay, and we have Mikey's a frog, but they still wanted me to design them. So because I just hit these roughs, and Mikey was a little bit more roundy, and stocky in the first version that I had done, um, and Edgar was actually, I thought even the roughs that I did was more interesting than what they ended up with. Um, I thought he should have been a two-legged character with those folding arms and the bug butt, right? And a lot of that influence came from when I was a kid and I was in Texas visiting my family near the border, because I had family on this side of the border and in Mexico. And we'd go and visit both families, just drive back and forth through the days. And I saw vinegro, which is like it's a type of scorpion. Vinegrom, it's this big, I think it's somewhere around that big, kind of scorpion type of bug, and it had this bug butt with these two hairs sticking out of the back,
Yeah.
right? And it affected me when I saw that. I saw that and I was like, what the? I was in shock looking at this thing, and I only saw the tail end of it. It was my cousin came in, saw it, and he ran to the house and he pulled us out and we ran back to see it, and he told me what it was. I just memorized the name and saw the butt sticking out of this hole, and then it went in, right? Really cool and freaky, right?
Yeah.
Edgar. Years later, that became Edgar, right? So, uh, which so he literally put me in the room, and I did multiple versions of Mikey, trying to find how to organize all that information that I came up with in the original drawing and make it something cool, right? Because we still had to convince the director that that was the one. So even though Rick loved it, we still had to convince the director where we wanted to go. And as it turned out, that particular director was very difficult, right? I should say many years later, um, after Men in Black 2 and then other movies that kind of crossed over with the guy, he is really, 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 really difficult guy to help along, I should say, right? I don't think he's doing very much, so I can say all that. but um, but I mean, just from the perspective of us getting something done, Rick would be, he was the guy, my face, my barrier. He would go out there there's a pun there, barrier. Uh, uh,
And I
it was,
suspect what Rick was doing was he's bringing the design along, and Rick has the perspective of the full timeline, because he's like, okay, he can look at Mikey and go, I think this is how long it'll take to do the mechanisms. This is how long it'll take to sculpt. This is like, and he's shifting everything in his head, right? Like all of his resources. And, and he's trying at some point to get the director to go, oh, yeah, this is great, or this is perfect. Or at some point say to the director, we're like running out of time. We need to make a decision here.
that part was more of the thing that the director would probably hear from Rick. Look, we got to get going. If you want to meet that schedule, we got to get going now. And the guys were ready to go. I mean, everyone was on background character masks, in the interim while I was trying to get stuff going. And they were working on other characters, like say Chucky. They were sculpting stuff there. Matt Rose would literally come in and steal my drawings and make Xeroxes of them and just start sculpting. I mean, he was phenomenal that way.
Yeah.
Making little maquettes based on stuff, right? So it didn't take long, actually, for me to come up with the frog, the one that ended up as the character Mikey, right? It took a couple times, a couple times. It took me a couple, I don't know, back and forths with the clients to come up with the actual direction for it. And one of the ones that actually led us there, which was already in the ballpark, was Rick came to me and he was very frustrated. And he goes, Carlos, so this is what they told me. And his jacket's on the floor and he's like looking at me. They want it with buggety eyes and this stupid trunk hanging off of the front. And I just looked at him like, I just started thinking. And I could see action going on around me. And it was him, hands were waving and all this stuff. He was frustrated. And I'm just kind of thinking, okay, I'm just going to make my guy work with that because it already does, right? And I did another drawing. And then he came by and he saw it and he goes, you did it. He loved it. Rick is the kind of guy that to work for, though, is that he likes artwork so much that he appreciates just the facility.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he loves drawing. And so he would just take over, he would sit on my chair and just sit there and look at the drawings. And he loved the drawing part of it. So he loved it when you came up with something that I knew when I thought something was cool, he would think it's cool. He would know why it was cool because he got it. That's why he was a really fun guy to work for all those years.
Yeah.
So that particular drawing I told you I did, after that direction that we got, and I think that was either from Spielberg directly, because he was a producer of the project, right? And I think it was directly from Spielberg, that one, the buggety eyes and the trunk and stuff. So they took it and yeah, done. Now let's see what the whole body looks like. It's ish. This is like in 95% it now. Okay, so I did a full body, got rid of all the ribbing on the trunk because I didn't want it there, but I just gave him something that was in that ballpark. And it still looked like the original drawing that I had done that weekend, right? But I trimmed down the figure now and made him more like that one that you're now seeing in the final project. I mean, in the movie, right? So I did the full body and that was it, done. And so that's Mikey, right? And that's
so at
kind
that
of,
point, did you make a front view and a side view to give them a whole look, or you're still?
it was just that one profile. That's all.
Yeah.
And I started to do turns on it. But the guys were already taking it, my friend Jose was he brought in an armature and he blocked out the sculpture. He did one interpretation on one side. I interpreted it on the other side. So you could, turn it two ways and look at two different interpretations of the drawing. Mine was more roundy. because they did one that was a little more had I don't know. It was just a different take. Actually, I was going to say more angular, but it actually wasn't. Um, we just did two different takes on it within the same silhouette. We were still playing how to approach it, how to interpret the
Yeah.
actual drawing. Um, and so another friend of ours, Ryan Peterson, got it, and his approach was a little bit more angular. And I, at first, I didn't like it. I thought it was too angular. But then someone sculpted over it and rounded off those angles. And Ryan is a phenomenal sculptor, right? Uh, I mean, seriously, a phenomenal interpreter too. He's a mega talent in my opinion, right? And a lot of people don't know him or his work. They should. Um, and a really sweet guy too, by the way. A lot of the artists are actually all really cool. You know, we all get along really well. There's no psychos.
Yeah.
Maybe to the outside world, we might seem that way, but anyway. So the interpretation finally came through, and Matt got a hold of it and was working with it, I think, and Ryan was working on it, and that was it. We had the maquette now, and that was it. We were good to go.
In the midst of all that, there's obviously a lot of collaboration, but there's a lot of you got to be open to that. If you're not open to that, you're sunk.
Right. Yeah. The opening, what you have to be open to is the interpretation of your drawing, and that's what I was trying to say there. Is that we were trying to find what that would be.
Yeah.
Right. What is the interpretation now? How are we going to interpret that drawing, right? Because there's multiple styles, multiple
Right.
hands. Do I go angular, a little bit more rigid on this cheekbone, and then round it off?
Right.
You know, do I approach all of it? Do I give it more structure here and then hang it, or do I just make it a clean line? Won't that look a little bit, sluggish? Is that what we want, or do we want it to feel like it has bones underneath it? All this stuff, but I don't have time to play with that in the drawing. We need to move on. Right? So it's moving forward, and all that's going to be done in clay.
In regard to Mikey, it's amazing what goes into designing a character that is so memorable in the span. I don't know that he's on screen for 5 minutes.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. It's a very, very, it's a very short kind of. There he is.
Yeah. I mean, from your pencil, into clay, into sculpting, into, all the stuff. And then you have this creature that has so much weight to it on the screen. If he hadn't had that much love in the design and execution, nobody'd remember him.
No, I mean, honestly, even the testing for the mechanism and the way the guy was walking, they were doing that outside in the parking lot. It was the funnest thing to see. That stuff for the first time that I was actually involved in that, right? And watching them, the guy practice walking on the rig that Matt had designed to be only a certain length. So that way, when the guy walked, he wasn't too high up. It was just a short, extension. And he was walking with the arms, they're out there, and they're an extension of his forearm. So you see these long arms, and the little fingers at the tip, and they're moving around out there. Pretty damn cool. I mean,
that's awesome. So that's working with Rick Baker and working with the preeminent creature effects guy in the industry at the time, and now we're going to switch over to working directly with the director and the producer of a film, who he's a heavy hitter as well. And it's Ridley Scott, and he wanted you to help him visualize the creatures for Prometheus.
Right. Yeah.
How was that call?
That was a good call.
There are calls and there are good calls.
Yeah.
That was a good call.
I won't go into too much of the history of that, but I'll just say that I was working at ILM at the time when the production designer called me up, and he introduced himself, and he goes, "Hello, Carlos. This is Arthur Max." You know, he goes, "You know who that is?" And I said yes, but I didn't. Right? No, I'm not that much of a film guy like people would think I am. I am not much of a. I don't know people in the art departments as
Yeah.
far as historical leaders and art department um, people, art directors, and all that. I just know my small little area of creatures. So within that world, I know everybody. Um, but outside of that, like film, I don't. I'm not that guy really. I only work in this industry to make a living because it's the best way for me to focus. Uh, how should I say this? It's the what I like to do, right? Uh, this is the only way that I can make a commercial living, or commercialize it to make a living, I should say, um, which is drawing creatures. Because it's something I used to love when I was a kid, and I loved it, and so I can make a living doing this, But I like drawing really weird stuff. Just for myself, if I could make the same kind of money, that's all I would do, right? But so this is a way for me to make a living, and have a life, family, and buy a car and do stuff, you know. Uh, so I this so that being said, all just to say that that's why I didn't really know who are. I kind of had an idea when he was saying it, and then he said it. Yeah, I work for Ridley Scott, and I'm like, okay, all right, yes, and it's like, okay. And he goes, so Ridley picked your portfolio out of a stack of portfolios. He wants you to come in. We're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing the prequel to Alien. And I'm like, oh, holy crap! I thought, whoa, and I had to sit down, and I thought, oh wow, okay, he picked me to be the guy. I didn't even know this was happening. I honestly had to sit down. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is so cool. Because I knew at that time, anyways, up to that point, that when Ridley picked a guy, that artist was always an artist for the film in many ways, right? Like he had the artist that he picked for Alien, he had Mobius, he had Chris Foss, he had Giger, right? All of them were big time heavy hitters, my heroes, right? Um, and Blade Runner, Sid Mead, took over, right?
Right.
And so all the artists mattered. There was a lot going through my head when I got that call, and I had a smile on my face that you could not wipe off for at least a couple of days. I walked immediately, getting off that phone call and saying, "Of course, yes, I'll be there whenever you want me to." Even though I have a job, I'm ready to leave whatever you need. I'll do whatever you want. So I walked into my boss, the head of the art department, a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, and I had this smile on my face, and I just looked at him, and I just told him, I go, "Dude, is what?" I think I just got the call, man. I got the call, dude. I go, Ridley just called, and he's looking at me. Really? I'm like, yeah. Wow, dude, that's awesome. You know, I go, let's go get a coffee. Come on. So we had to leave. I go, all right, hold on. And we just went out and we just started talking. He goes, dude, you got to leave for this one. And it's like, you got to do this. I'm like, well, I'm going to do it for here so we can get the job. This is what I'm thinking. I want us to get it. And he goes, cool. So, right. But of course, it didn't work out that way. A lot of stuff that happened in between there now. Me ending up leaving ILM at this time. Anyways, it was about that time for me to leave ILM. There was just not a lot left for me there, and I think we needed a break from each other. I'd been there for over a decade, um, and great place. It just, I've been there for a long time. So uh, there was another division starting that was all creature division. for another company, and they made me a huge offer to go and work there and to be the art lead for an all digital creature division of a company that was in Southern California. And we were going to be literally right down the street from ILM. And so we did that. And I was there for a couple of years before the main parent company went belly up. There was some stuff that it was a big debacle. They really screwed up. Anyway, long story short, I ended up working for Ridley through all of this, through one company into another company, trying to bring the job to them, and it didn't work. People's budgets weren't working. They weren't lining up. And in my opinion, they weren't aggressive enough and trying to get this project that would put them on the map, right, in a different way. They dropped the ball. So I ended up working on the job outside of everyone and just doing it. And it was awesome. Ridley and
Which,
I.
I mean, that says a lot because you're in development for how long with him and this other company, would you say?
Geez, I was in that company for, I kept the job there while I went for the other company. And within those 2 years, I worked on it, right? And I think that I had to work on it on the side. Is that why I brought the job to them, but then they couldn't do it. So I ended up having to do it as a freelance job while I was there. So even though I was there for, say, like a couple years before the company went belly up, I was working on the project, for them and then outside of them again. So it's the same thing with ILM. I worked for it.
Yeah.
I brought the company the job. They couldn't do it. I had already started the job as a freelance gig, wanted to bring it to them. They couldn't do it, and they asked me not to work on it. And of course, that wasn't going to happen. This is part of the reasons why I ended up leaving at a certain point. So there's that, right? So, and that's how it was chaotic on the side. It's like bombs were being dropped off as I got my dream job, all around me. There was a
But
war.
to your point earlier, Ridley stayed married to your designs. Like he was in with you regardless of what was going on around.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So that's
honestly,
exciting.
even my first plane flights to try to get to my first meeting, okay, funny story, is that, I'm in the plane, I'm not used to flying, okay?
Yeah.
So it's a thing for me trying to get beyond, past the barrier of being afraid to fly, right? So I took a window seat. I'm pretty much almost there, feeling pretty good about flying because I hadn't done many flights. And I'm looking over at the wing because I like to sit in the middle, and something flew into one of the engines and knocked it out. Okay, I'm watching this. Okay, now I'm like William Shatner watching a gremlin attack. Okay, so the plane literally, everyone's loud because it's a packed plane. Okay, the plane drops, and I hear the engine go gun, 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 gun. Okay, and then I see smoke shoot out of it, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm looking around, and I hear the plane drop, and everyone goes, ah! They scream, right? And then they just go back to talking, and I'm sitting there going, no, thinking, all right, where is everybody? I'm waiting. Why do people just think that we just hit some sort of, air pocket? Finally, the intercom goes on, and the captain says, we're going to have to turn around because we have a little bit of a pressurization issue. And I'm thinking, nah, that's not it. We make a hard turn, and now we're flying super low, right over the hillsides. Just 10 minutes into the flight, right? We fly back, and we are literally, really, I don't know how to judge the height of that, but we were low. Okay, we're flying, we're flying back, and we land. And as we're hitting the tarmac, fire engines are on the side of us, right, flanking us on both sides. As we stop on the tarmac, from nowhere, there's guys running back that got on, firemen running back and forth down the aisles, right? And I'm still looking at everybody, and nobody is reacting to this.
Just a little pressurization issue.
Yeah, right. So I have to call Arthur and tell him, yeah, dude, I was on my way to see you, and the plane almost exploded. Okay. So they reset the meeting anyways. It was just such a off the wall story. It was not on the news anywhere. Of course not. They're never going to publicize something like that. But
Right.
apparently my brother-in-law in LA saw the news and it did talk about it there. But I never saw it on our news.
Well, I'm glad it happened there because that's like a 10-hour flight, I think, from San Fran. If you're going, were you going to London?
Oh, no.
Where are you going?
No, it was just a 30-minute flight.
Oh, you're just going to LA?
Yeah, just to LA to scot-free, right? Scot-free is in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, right? So we reset the meeting, and I made it. And then Ridley told me a crazy story, my first meeting with him, and told me a crazy story with his parents and how the plane was on fire. They were out standing on the wing while the plane was on fire, and they had to jump off the wing onto one of those, slides.
Yeah.
He says it was way crazier than mine. But it was a good story. So he was just going with it until we were telling stories. It was a crazy, funny first meeting after all that. But so now, about the job. Now, in contrast to, say, Men in Black, where I had Rick working with me and trying to interpret the director's ideas and non-ideas about things, right? Ridley actually had a whole lookbook that he put in front of me of images that he kind of put together for specific areas of the film relating to the characters, the feeling of what he was looking for, right? I felt like I was talking to an artist rather than even a director. He was talking about Russian painters that I knew of. He was even kind of showing me artwork from contemporary Russian painters that I didn't know, that he liked some of their work. And I'm a fan of Russian artists, actually, because I like the drama they bring, a lot of melodrama, even in their color palette is always very interesting to me. But so he was putting a lot of that stuff in front of me. We were talking about all kinds of art, right? And it was, I don't get that, like, ever with the director to talk artwork, who knows painters and knows how to talk about them, who understands the difference between drawing and rendering, right? The difference between those two things is not even a lot of artists know the difference. People that call themselves artists, anyways, I should say, they don't know the difference between drawing and rendering. Side note, that was one of the things that I used to be very critical of when I was younger, before Photoshop and everything. When I would look at a really rendered image versus a drawing that was a design of something, I could tell that the guy that rendered something was trying to hide the fact that he didn't know what he was drawing. And he would come up with a really beautiful rendering and hide everything in shadows.
Yeah.
And to me, that showed that he wasn't a very good designer. This is back then. Then Photoshop came in and completely clouded all that up. And there's these beautifully rendered photographic images of really limited design. It's very average design work, but since it looks so beautifully rendered and put together, clients buy it. They love it. And they don't know that they're just looking at the most mediocre thing because it just looks like, they don't know the difference. That's my point, so working with Ridley was, and hearing that kind of talk coming back at me, was, it's like a cold drink of water in a desert. Seriously, it was unbelievable. So he showed me all this stuff that he had, and the cool thing about it, right, is that he's showing me stuff, and I would stop him and I would just say, okay, so you're saying this. can I do this then? And he just looked at me and goes, yes, that sounds good. Do that. That's the way he responded every single time. He'd always say yes. Yeah, do that. That sounds good. So whenever he talked, I'd kind of stop him after a while and go, wait a minute, can I ask you a question? So if we're doing this, and he just looked at me and go, yes. And then he'd sit back in his chair and I go, yes. I go, can I go here? And he goes, yes, do that. So then he'd continue talking, right? And that's the way we went. I would present him the artwork, and the way Ridley reacted was first he'd talk about the artwork. How did you do this? How did you actually make this image? And I go, oh, you know what it is? I sculpted this, I photographed it, and then I illustrated over the photograph. And he goes, wow. And he's just looking at it, right? He was into the artwork.
Yeah.
Then he'd comment about the design, and we talked about stuff.
Well, that's really interesting. That sounds very similar to Rick, right?
Right.
So you've got somebody who is immensely talented and legends in the industry, right? But they love it. They love art, and they love artists and
right.
process.
Yeah. The difference is that one was my buffer.
Yeah.
Right. And one was the actual director. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to kind of, bring Rick just calling him my buffer, right? Because he was my client the way that I saw it, right?
Right.
But the client was the director.
Right.
So that
well,
director,
there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
In that, like,
Yeah.
Ridley had to say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So from that perspective, that's the way we were able to move forward. And he would come up with ideas, and that he would come to a conclusion after we would try something for a while. And there was, like, say for the engineers, I had come up with all this stuff that I thought was really cool that wasn't used, right? For the engineers, the carapace of them wearing something living over them to help them breathe on other planets. I had technology that was created by these remotes. I call them familiars, that would just rotate or flutter around them, that would create kind of a fog where the technology would appear as a screen, in that fog, and they could see it whenever they thought about it. So it was different technology, something else other than, say, what we call technology. I wanted it to be part of them.
Now, was that concept that came out of the script, or was this stuff that came out of your meetings with Ridley, or is this just you kind of know what the characters are going to be, and now you're just dreaming possibilities?
Yeah, this is me. All of this is me dreaming per discussion that Ridley spoke the script to me, because there was no script yet that he would call the script, right?
Yeah.
The script that we had at that time was very much in line with the Alien versus Predator type of movies, right? It was a terrible script. It was just a shoot 'em up, bang bang type of movie, right? So that was not it. Ridley would kind of recite his version of the story to me, and I sat there for a couple hours with him, with more than a couple hours. It was the whole day. I flew down there for 2 days, so it was 2 sessions of him talking to me, right? And then I would fly back up north and work from home, right? A lot of what he was actually describing was the story, right? Not what he wanted for the characters per se. Because the first idea for the engineers was that as giant whales, it was just a feeling word, right? And that's what he told me. He goes, I'm thinking of giant whales, flying through the sky, maybe something that these beings are more than what we can imagine, something. And that's what he would throw at me. And that's the way I think. That's why I have trouble actually describing what I do a lot of times, because you're abstract and you don't really know how to describe what you are thinking when you're trying to approach the things that you're going to design, right?
Yeah.
It's very abstract. You're pulling from the chaos of all these all these things that you can imagine out there, and you're trying to form all those crazy feelings into an idea, right? I mean, this is abstract, right? Even the way I'm describing this,
Right.
because you're trying to form and make sense out of the chaos, right? We were talking about this earlier. I love to live in that space, and try to find things. And I practiced this actually when I was a kid. That before I'd go to sleep, I would lie down in the chaos of my thoughts, and I would tell myself, all right, you're not going to sleep until you can think of something really cool, right? Right. So I would sit there and imagine something, and I needed to see something really weird and interesting. And then I go, okay, that's it. And I'll go to sleep. Hopefully I'll remember that in the morning. Yeah.
And then would you draw it in the morning, or you just remember it?
Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't,
Yeah.
but all that stuff stayed there. I just wanted to see an image. That's all.
Yeah.
So I mean, I didn't know that at the time that I was actually just practicing imagining.
Right.
So it's such a natural thing to live in that world now, still as an adult, uh, because I can go there. I tell a lot of directors, I tell them that I need to go off and daydream, which means that there's not going to be drawing during that time. So I need you to tell me what your project is so I can daydream for a while, right? And if you let me, the more daydream time you give me, within reason, of course, right? Then I don't want you to pay for me to be around hanging out for a week. I mean, just like if you give me like a day or two, just a day and a half maybe, I may start sketching during this time to daydream and to imagine something, because I want to get something unique, and that's the only way it's going to come,
So
right?
when you do that, do you go for a walk, or do you just sit in the house, or like what do you
Yeah,
do?
I don't know. It's yeah, maybe I sit at the piano, maybe I do lie around. Maybe, yeah, I can't be doing something else other than that. Piano is okay because it's still creative, because you're just sitting and you're playing, but I can't be doing anything other than that.
Right.
I have to literally sit and daydream.
Right.
And I need to stare, even if I'm staring outside, sitting and staring at just, the trees and stuff. Go to a restaurant, maybe, take the wife, and we just sit there and I just stare off for a while, you know. And the restaurant has to be where I can see trees, though, because I have to stare at the trees or the sky. If I'm just staring at buildings, it won't necessarily be as easy, oddly. Um, and I'm not saying that this is like the science of the way I operate,
Sure.
but it's a preference if I can, right? Because I'm going to do that anyway, even if I'm just sitting in my room. I might just sit looking at a drawing that I did and think, okay, I need to capture that. That's it. A drawing I had done, and I'm looking at that drawing. I'm thinking, okay, this is it. This is how I wanted to go. And it kind of, I really went there because Arthur was actually really great production designer in the sense that he was always sending me stuff. He was very active. At first, I honestly thought that it was going to be a hindrance to me. I don't like to be in communication with people bothering me with stuff, right? I like to be by myself working. Um, but in hindsight, after working on another project where he wasn't there, right, I really missed having him around because he was very active in sending me stuff, and then I would send him stuff back. I introduced them to the Goblin Shark idea as being a terrestrial kind of, living example of the ejecting mouth. I saw that and I sent it to them and they loved it. And I told them, I go, look, I mean, here it is, the Goblin Shark. It's already ejecting its mouth. I mean, we gotta reference this somewhere, right? And so I don't want to jump into that character, but that is what I used as reference for, say, the neomorphs. And
Well, before we get more into
yeah,
that, it sounds to me almost like you asked the director, "Can I have permission to go sit in this dinghy, and I'm going to push out from shore, and I'm going to go into that fog for a little bit."
yeah,
And then you go out into the fog, and then there's your production designer on the shore. He can't really see you, and you can't see him, but he's yelling out, "Hey, the direction is over here." And you're hearing that, and it's like, "Oh yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for giving me the direction." And then at some point, you're able to come back together.
Yeah, well, he didn't give me direction as much as he says, "What about this?"
Yeah.
And he would throw stuff out there,
Yeah.
and I would look at it and like, "Yeah, nah," but I do like that piece right there. And I mean, when it comes to working in film, I really own my territory,
Yeah.
right? And I think with a guy like Ridley, he really appreciated that, and I think that that's what he saw in my work. And Denis Villeneuve uh, from Dune, speaking of which, he told me that that's what he liked about my work, right? That he knows that he could see that I thought on my own and that's why he liked me a lot, to work on his movies in any way, even if it's the smallest little way he likes to have me in there. That's what he told me. Okay. So now coming back to the engineers, right? Um, so I went away and started drawing, coming up with a bunch of ideas. And to this day, I still really like all the stuff I did that wasn't used. And I will use them again someday. Okay. Um, and bring them back in another incarnation for something else. But the one thing that I did is I decided to blanch one character and make it white, and I wanted it to feel like it was almost vibrating into our space of existence, right? And it was white, and you could hear the hum too whenever it came onto the screen. So you'd hear this low, and they were there, but they're not there, but they are there at the same time. It was one idea, right?
Yeah.
But Ridley just went straight to it, said, yes, we'll make them white. That led him to saying, you know what? Let's make them out of marble. You know what? I want them to look like David, and I want that to be why we always sculpted that face with the Roman nose.
Mm.
I wanted to be like it's something so deep in humanity that we don't realize that that's why we're sculpting that, because it's the sculpt that we're sculpting the face of our progenitors, right? In his mind, right? That's the way he was looking at it. That story had so many overtones to it as a Christian that I was just kind of looking at him. I'm thinking, this guy's telling the story of the Nephilim. And I don't think he knows that. He's talking the story of the fallen ones. And I really, but I couldn't talk about that because nobody knew that story.
Sure.
Right. So I just thought, oh, well, but it really pulled me in to this story even more. And how I approached all the design work, right? Because I was approaching it from that perspective. We are doing Paradise Lost, right? Well, this is the way I'm doing it. But I'm actually thinking that we're not even doing Paradise. We're doing a version of the Divine Comedy that maybe wasn't written. We're doing the first part of the fallen ones, right? When they fell down, and and when they see, the enemy sees women for the first time, and they want to leave their angelic state and become like man and procreate, and they created these giants, right? There's all these overtones that are these parallels there, and I was thinking, oh wow, this is really interesting, man. I'm really getting into this now, and so that's how that worked, anyways. And how we ended up to where the engineers were, right? Where I went off, came up with all these ideas, really liked them all, but one hit him, and then he pulled it in, and then he found his narrative, right? And how to bring that character into the narrative and what that narrative was going to be, the relationship between, say, the engineer, the guy that's in the suit, the actual space jockey, who that guy was going to be, right? And what that suit was, I had to leave that. Um, I didn't have the bandwidth to work on this suit and then go on to work on all these. There were going to be ultramorphs and giant xenomorphs, and then the new guy, which I pitched him, which became the Deacon, right? The ancestor to what became the xenomorph, right? I pitched him actually that idea. That wasn't in the script. What became the Deacon was not written that way. I can say that, you know what I mean. I gave him this design. I sculpted it, And I presented it to him, and I go, "Hey, man, I think this would be cool." As then he goes, "Yeah," and I found out through Arthur that he was calling it the Deacon. Well, he was calling it the Bishop at first, and then when I went to visit him, and he called it the Deacon. And I've said this before, but I laughed at him, and I go, "Oh, he's been demoted. He's now only a deacon." At first, he was a bishop. He looked at me and he started laughing, and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I realized that there was a character named Bishop, and that had to be the reason why he just called it the Deacon after that." But he said he has a
That's
pontiff hat,
funny.
you know. So I thought, okay, a pontiff hat. Deacons don't wear pontiff hats, you know. So anyway, so that was that's how we ended up there, though, for the engineers.
I'm sneaking looks at your designs online for this too as we're chatting, just to keep up with everything. That's
Yeah,
awesome. So let's move on then to our third and final director that you're working with, and it was for a film that was a long time in the making, I think, for a lot of fans of Stephen King, and it is the movie It, and you conceptualized and designed Pennywise in many of his incarnations.
right. Yes.
What was that process like?
Well, like I'll just say the difference now. When they approached me for this, I knew about the TV show, and I wasn't as excited. Okay, I thought
And you're talking about the 1990s one with
Tim Curry, yeah,
Tim Curry as
yeah,
Pennywise, yeah,
yeah,
made
and
for TV. Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't as excited. I thought, clown, what the heck am I going to do for this? You know, I thought, okay. The director though, Andy, we had almost worked together on a version of The Mummy the year before that, before we started on it, right? And our version of The Mummy would have been the quintessential Mummy. Let me tell you, his version of The Mummy was a horror movie again, and it was awesome. Universal screwed up. They should have made that movie. Seriously, they really did. They should
I
still go
wonder why
back.
they've taken so much horror out of their horror.
They're trying to compete with the Marvel universe.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And I don't know why they're trying to do that. They have this these crazy properties, and they need to own who they are. That is Hollywood history. The very first films, right?
right.
Dracula, Frankenstein, 1933, and Dracula. You know what I mean? Same period. I mean, how do you not know who you are? I just don't. I don't get that. I'm really confused by how they handle their properties, and you know, I don't get it. They should. They were the biggest, I think, studio in all, and I think it's Fox now because of all their big name properties that are making tons of money, and their partnership with Disney, I think. But Universal was by far the big dog, I think, on the street, and as they should be with the properties they own. But I don't think they're using. They're not very smart about using them. They should have made. Uh, um, they should have made the Andy's Mummy movie. It was fantastic, honestly. It was a horror movie again. I loved it, and I really liked Andy a lot. I met him and his sister Barbara, who was the producer there, um, and they were really nice people. I liked them a lot. They were Spanish speaking, so I don't get to be around that a lot. It helps me to practice, Uh, so that was really good. I enjoyed them quite a bit, but the movie didn't happen, and so I get a call um, for it years later now, or a year and a half maybe. No, it was more than that. It was maybe a couple years later. Uh, Maybe, yeah, somewhere around there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, and it's for it, and I wasn't that excited about it, but Andy's attached to it. I'm thinking that this is going to be interesting somehow, and I just want to work with Andy again. Of course, I'm not going to say no. Uh, so then they tell me what the approach is, and instantly I'm sucked in. And I haven't been sucked into a project like that in years at this point, right? And so when they told me what they were going to do, it was more of a chaos of a cartoon made real. And the character is not unlike the thing, but more of a singular character that can do stuff with himself. A little. That's what they were thinking, right? Uh, I went all the way into that and got very crazy with it. Uh, and I approached it completely differently than I had any other project prior to that. I bought a sketchbook and I started drawing in graphite, which I don't do for that kind of artwork.
Why
I
did you
like
make that choice?
it had a feeling that it needed to be black and white, like an old black and white movie. And I wanted that feeling. I wanted to play with lighting for these creatures. I mean, they already had a drawing that Andy had done of Pennywise, and they were going with something already for that with the makeup, right? And so I had something to work with. And my job was just to design the character. What is he like? What does he do? How does he react? How does he perform? Right? How does he do whatever he does? Right? Uh, so it was a combination of Tim Burton and The Thing, like Beetlejuice, The Thing, and and a crazy Warner Brothers cartoon, and make it real, right? And horrific. So, uh, and it kind of like I guess what Rob did with the rabbit in the remake of the Twilight Zone, right?
So good.
Pull a rabbit
Yeah.
out of the hat, you know, but not as monstrous. It's more about this character and being and how he manipulates everything. So even himself and who he is, he's not necessarily what you're seeing. He's something else. So I started sketching and restricting myself to this much space, so I would work faster and I could render things out to a degree, which I used to criticize before. But now this particular project required it for the emotion. It wasn't just about showing off a render. It was more about the feeling of the drawing that I was trying to get across to the director. So I started this way. And I first started doing my wax pencil traditional, and the feeling wasn't there. And I knew that. And I thought, man, and I switched it up after the first week. That's when I realized I wanted to go this other way. And I had already experimented with it on my own, um, just for doing little doodles. And so I had practice already working in this space. And I decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it for this project. And as soon as I started doing that, Andy loved everything I was giving him. And there were no notes. He just kept on, yep, tell him to continue going. And I go, so what about this? He goes, yep, he loved this and he loved that. Continue doing this. And I said, okay, don't you guys want me to see how this would work over your contortionists to try to make it work in a practical way? So I did a couple of drawings, and they didn't like that at all. They didn't want that from me. They liked what I was doing with just these, these drawings that were more inspiration and helping them to get there, to
Yeah,
feel the character.
sometimes the practical robs the piece of the emotion and the romance, right?
Yeah, I mean it does. So, um, so
And I
yes,
would say that your work, because I've seen your drawings and then I've seen the movie, it comes through completely. Like
yeah,
that the and I hadn't considered the obviously there's a dark humor, cartoonish element to it. But hearing that Warner Brothers element that you were kind of rolling into it, and when you see the character go from the clown to rolling his eyes back, almost like a cat does
yep,
before it's going to throw up, and
yeah,
then all the teeth come out, and then it bites. I mean,
yeah,
it's a shocking transformation,
right.
really shocking, unexpected.
Yeah, it was. I thought they did that really well. Um, it was really cool. I mean, I really enjoyed the movie. which I didn't expect to. I never know what to expect in the final project to see what the final result is. Um, so as far as after seeing that movie, just to cut straight to that, but I'll come back to this other stuff, is that I was, as far as I was concerned, I'll work on whatever this guy wants me to work on after that, right? Because the process that he created he created this kind of area for me, this territory, this kind of, you know, I don't know, psychic kind of space, right, for me to operate in, that he didn't interfere or allow people to mess with, right? He gave me the space to just keep, by telling me just keep on going. You know, we love it. Tell me to keep doing more. Keep doing more. Keep doing more. I was drawing for weeks, you know, and I was having the funnest. I mean, it was one of the best situations I've ever been in, because it was exploration. I had never done what I was doing professionally, say, to that level, and allowed to go and be that inventive with a single character, ever. And since, probably, I would say, right? With that amount of freedom, and that much support from the clients, right? To be in that space, because it was the perfect amount of direction and freedom. So I knew where my bookends were because I had it. It was a character. Those are my bookends. I can't leave this character. Here's my bookend. I cannot leave that guy. It has to be him. Now I can go wild with this guy. He's already established. Just have fun with who he is, right? And they loved my approach. So it was the best time I ever had. I mean, any project, that was probably one of the funnest times I've ever had, was drawing on that particular project.
Now, did your drawings come from largely from your imagination, or were there gags in the script already? How did that happen?
Yeah, I didn't have the script. It was just a free for all.
Okay.
I was just exploring the acting.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just a free for all. The fact that it showed up, and I told them that when I met with them for it too, right? I met with them, and I worked in Toronto for a couple of weeks out there before I came back and worked from home. The first movie, I told them, I go, that first movie was the funnest time I've ever had, just so you guys understand, right? There was a difference between It 1 and It 2, right? It 2 wasn't what it was in the first film, right? And it wasn't the same situation per se. I had the the VFX guy was a little bit more involved and trying to funnel where everything was going. And in the first one, he didn't do that. So it was more work than the first one was. So,
Yeah.
and I think it came through in the film too. You know, the first film was very free flowing and it just, everything fit. The second one, there was a little bit more effort to make it what it was, and it felt that way, right?
Yeah.
It didn't flow as much. As much as I still liked both movies, I'm just talking about just the feeling artistically, right?
Yeah.
But like I said,
Well, that's like the difference between going out onto the dance floor and just dancing, and then going out onto the dance floor later and have somebody say, no, 2, 3, 4. They're constantly yelling. It's like you can't just be in the moment.
right. No, and that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was, like I said, the director, that guy will work with him on anything he does because he's really a cool dude. And it was, fun being out in Toronto for that time. But yeah, it was just not, he creates good spaces that I would like to work in more. That's all.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually not an easy thing to do. I notice for a lot of clients, they don't know how to be fearless in that they're not afraid to allow you the responsibility of this character, right? Ridley had no fear about that, but the time was, say, less. I had less time on that one than I did, say, on It. uh, the first movie. Uh, and I was experimenting with a lot of stuff, you know, but it was pretty damn close, I would say, for Prometheus, in that the ideas that I came up with there, I still, they're going to litter my palette of, say, things to, I should say, objects, my tool shed is full. I mean, it goes all the way, this stuff never goes away. So the
Right.
more stuff that you come up with, you're filling up your tool shed, right?
Right.
With ideas,
Well, and
people are cool.
your look is your look too. Not that you can't venture off and push different things, but if somebody wants Carlos Huante for something, they want you for a specific look.
You
And
hope
that's
so.
that's a
Yeah.
pretty remarkable thing. How's it feel to have been at this point in your career? That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. I can't say that that's not cool, right? When people hire me for that,
You
it
can't
is.
say that because I would tell you you're wrong. It is
No,
very cool.
it's interesting because you have that, if you have it, right, say, and they hire you for whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
But the thing is that your drive never diminishes, and you always feel like in every single project that you have to prove yourself, just like you did back when you were in your 20s. Same thing. You still have to do it because now it's for different reasons. You know what I mean? When you're proving yourself at the beginning, you're proving yourself to get a name, and then you get older, then you have to prove yourself to own that name, to keep owning it, right? And to keep everything that you do as having some sort of value still, right? So you have it never goes away. You
Yeah.
have to work just as hard, and anyone who doesn't is really kidding themselves, um, because before they know it, anything that they tried or thought that they earned or through their life will be gone in a flash, because this entertainment business is as thick as a paper, a sheet of paper. It's it's flash paper even. If it gets next to any flame at all, it's all gone. You know,
Yeah.
because they don't care. I mean, and I'm not saying that in a bitter way. I'm just saying that you have to care. And I always tell that to all the young guys. I tell them, I go, you have to care about what you do. Never, ever depend on the client to actually do something for you, that they're going to promote you in some way. And not promotion in the sense that someone gets a promotion to a higher position. I'm saying as in advertising who you are and what you do, right? You need to be that guy,
Yeah.
right? So own your territory by owning it, being that guy. Um, and the hardest part is actually being sober minded enough to actually judge whether or not you are that guy without your ego getting in the way or being hurt, right? And you have to know whether you are that guy or not, and be able to discern whether or not you have what you think you have.
How did you find that? How do you keep that sober mindedness? Does your wife help you? Do your friends help you?
Having people that aren't artists around you that
Yeah.
don't get what you do
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. But I've studied enough artwork, and I'm actually really hard on myself as to what is actually good and what is not that I do. Um, and I don't listen to when people tell me that they like something that I do. I really kind of get put off when they like the most average thing that I've done and that they love it. I actually get really put off by that. I find it really weird. It's a weird, maybe not so good quality, but it's the best way that I know how to manage myself,
Yeah.
right? And try to get better at what I do. The only problem with that, and the backside of that, is that you can get good enough to where you no longer um, you can't, you're not in tune with what the average taste level is anymore. And so you always want to deliver at a high level. And that if you do, you're really going to live a disappointed life, because the what people are used to is say, here to here, the best stuff ever done, the lowest, this is down at the bottom right here. People's taste levels are down. Here's the middle here. This is what they think is really good. And that's where they're at. So when you try to deliver something here in the middle, even, which is pretty average, just a little bit above average, they're barely going to be able to swallow that. They can't. And you're going to suffer a lot of frustration. And it is very frustrating to have to go through that. It's kind of, you listen to it's kind of what J.M.W. Turner, the painter, what he went through in the last parts of his life. When he got so good at understanding color, value, and shapes, and how to approach a painting, right, that he started abstracting in the 1700s, okay? It didn't go over too well.
No.
They called him names. They said he was a has-been. I mean, this guy had to deal with all that, and he was a genius. Those last paintings are the best things. He was ahead of his time. I think guys like that, like Jimi Hendrix, got there where he wasn't allowed to even go into where he wanted to go. There's guys that, in other disciplines that get to that space where they want to go beyond, because now they've reached that place of understanding of what they do, right? And as an artist working in the commercial world, man, you're asking for a world of pain.
Yeah.
Because that's not what that's for, But
Well,
you do
yeah.
have to go there to be the best if you really
Yeah.
want to. And and I'm sorry, but the idea that you want to be that good, you have to be good enough to be able to bring yourself down to meet that palette that people. And it sounds a little bit, kind of egotistical to say that, but it's not, because you are learning yourself into. That's the whole point, right? To learn yourself into another place, to be able to deliver on every level. When the challenge comes up, where you're going to go, right? You
Right.
can actually access different areas of that discipline because you've worked it. So you can access things that these guys that operate from here, the middle to the bottom, right? They can never access that. They'll never present something really cool that'll fit right there in the middle. It'll be something regurgitated from what they've known, which is down in the lower level, right?
Yeah.
If I can say it that way, right?
Well,
So,
I mean, Shakespeare wrote for the haughty toddy, and then he wrote for, what did they call the people who were on the ground level? The groundlings. He wrote for the groundlings, people who paid pennies to come in,
yeah,
and he put in jokes in his plays for them, and he was maybe the most breakthrough artist, one of the
yeah,
top 2 or 3 ever, right?
right. Yeah. No, well, there it is. I mean, that's a really good example right there, too. Is to be able to appeal, it still has to be appealing or accessible to everybody.
Right.
People that don't live in that world, their imagination isn't there. You know,
Yeah.
um, it was interesting to see my dad react to some of the work. He was afraid that people weren't going to get it. That's his only fear. He was like, Carlos, did you see the way they reacted? They did not get what you did. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's okay. I'm not going to water myself down for everybody. I told him when it comes to my own work. I already do that for a living, right? I have to operate in the world of acceptable to a degree, right? And find that space, whether I'm up here thinking, around, in this particular discipline that I have, right? Because I've been doing it for so long, I can operate up here, right? But it doesn't mean that I am going to, present heady ideas to clients where the project is a monster. I mean, come on, that's, you're going to deliver something that's going to meet that. So right? And the guys that are down here, like say, and I'm sorry, I'm using this. Nobody think that, oh, these lesser guys. No, but I'm just talking about the where they operate, right? And their
Right.
imaginations are down, and that's not something they're just trying to do the job, right? And a lot of those guys, they're technicians and they have a job. They know they've seen what's been done and they can deliver that, right? Um, you're going to try to deliver within that world too. So we're all competing at that level, right? But we're just coming at it from different perspectives. Some of the stuff coming from the most average world will be more successful because they're already there, right? And if you're trying to come from up here to meet that without any reference to that commercial world and things that have been done, right? You're going to try to get there from a different place. So it's going to look different and it might be more interesting, but it doesn't mean that the client's going to get it. He may like this thing because it may be scraping what you were trying to come from, you know? So it doesn't mean that what I do is more successful, right? For in the final, the guys with operating purely from their perspective, which is as a technician, right? And regurgitating ideas and just Frankensteining ideas together. They may meet the criteria for that character better than I did coming from nowhere, right? So we're still on equal ground in the
Right.
end.
Right.
So
Because everything needs to service the project at
that's
hand.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the deal.
Yeah. In the end, that's it.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Thanks, Carlos. Thanks again. Thanks for coming back to be my guest. I really appreciate you.
yeah, man. Yeah, this was fun talking about stuff.
Where can people find you or see your work? Where do you want to send them to?
My website is under my name, carloshuante.com. They can see, I have a page, Carlos is galleryanatom.com. And I am under Gallery Anatom on Instagram, and also my name, Carlos Huante, on Instagram as well, which is probably better almost than the websites because I'm live there and I'm posting just stuff that I'm, screwing around with at home at night sometimes. After hours sketching and, people, every once in a while, I pick someone out of the comments that I have a conversation with on there because they ask either a really pointed question or they're being very critical and I want to round them out, and help just to get rid of the point and help them understand it. It's not necessarily what about this, and then we have a talk. So sometimes, I do that. And I think it's fun. That part is fun. So,
Yeah.
no.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Cool, man. Good seeing you, John.
You too. Didn't I tell you that would be good stuff? Carlos is a really cool guy. He's obviously fantastic at his work, but I like the guy even more than his work. And I'm really grateful for all that he shared, all the wonderful insights, all the stories. I mean, getting to work with Rick Baker and to design these incredible characters, and that goes across the board, right? Working with Ridley Scott and carrying on in the vein of the groundwork that H.R. Giger laid, but taking a step back and imagining what that might look like if you had to design centuries before Giger, and then of course the look and the flavor and the feel of the character of Pennywise. Such amazing stuff. And of course, I really do like that last segment where Carlos was just sharing about being aware of your artistic taste and where you're headed, because it may start to leave the standards of the times, and that can be a problem if you're out of touch with your audience. If you don't care about your audience, it's fine. Go do your thing. And even if you do care about your audience, you can still do your thing on the side. Carlos is forever working and posting his own things. So it's something that you can do. But if we're making a living, we got to be aware of the taste of our audience and the standards that have been set around those tastes. So there you have it. That is it for this week's episode. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you are busy creating things, learning whatever it is you need to learn, that next skill, that next client that's on your list that you're going to call them and uh, try to work out a relationship with them so that you can solve their problems and you have them as a client for the next 20, 30, 40, 100 years, please. That would be awesome. So, on behalf of the Breakthrough Creative, I'm John McDevitt, and I hope you are having a great creative day. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.